Now, this next story is one I had been ignoring on purpose, right, because it seemed somewhat small fry. But now the cops have got involved, and we probably have no choice. That's because Manchester police have opened an investigation into Angela Rayner. The investigation into Labour's deputy leader concerns the sale of her council house. So what's going on here? Well, it seems to be the culmination of a story that's been pushed for weeks by the right-wing press. Back in February, the Mail on Sunday branded Angela Rayner a hypocrite for having made a £48,000 profit on the sale of her council home. Now, the hypocrisy suggestion then was because Labour have said they will review right to buy discounts if they get into office. Now, that story seems rather banal, a sort of classic hypocrisy thing, the press like to do. But in early March, the paper upped the ante with a new story about the home. So this time, the paper declared there were new questions for 2 homes Rayner over council upgrade for house she didn't live in. Now, the claim there was that Angela Rayner had benefited from an upgrade to her council home, which she didn't own at that point, even though according to the Mail, by then she had moved in with her new husband a mile away. So she got the council home before she got married. Then she gets married, and they're claiming she moved in with her husband, but the council weren't fully aware of that and then upgraded the house. That's their claim. Then this became a story about tax. So we've gone from hypocrisy to the council did it up when she wasn't living there, and now there's an element which is a claim that she avoided some tax. And now that's because when Angela Rayner sold her council home, she didn't pay capital gains tax. Now, that would be perfectly above board if it was her main residence. You don't pay capital gains tax on a main residence, but it would be problematic if she, in fact, principally lived somewhere else. These aren't huge numbers we're talking about. According to the BBC, if it were the case that this wasn't her primary residence, she might owe the taxman £3,500. Not insignificant sum, but we're not talking sort of major political corruption here. It hardly seems earth-shaking to me, but the Mail, once again, have a different perspective. So this Monday, they led with the headline, "Rayner's making a fool of you, Keir." That was based on a statement from the Tory chairman or Tory deputy chairman saying the situation was corrosive to standards in public life. Of course, the Tory party are not an organisation that can speak with any integrity about those. So is any of this really a problem? Well, this was Angela Rayner speaking to the BBC late last month.
I've been very clear. There's no rules broken. The police, they tried to manufacture a police investigation. They said there's no issues there. I got tax advice which says there was no capital gains tax. It's a non-story manufactured to try and smear me. But at the same time, you've got the Chancellor in the budget making snide jokes at the dispatch box while many working people are struggling with their bills. And he forgot he had 7 luxury flats, conveniently. I've never been in those circumstances before. And yet the way in which that was portrayed over the last couple of weeks, I felt was unacceptable. I got expert tax advice that was very clear that there was no capital gains tax and there was no wrongdoing, there was no unlawfulness or anything else in regards to my property 15 years ago. I was a home care worker. I didn't have an accountant. I had, as most people would, you put your house on the market, you get a legal conveyancing solicitor, and you get an estate agent. But since those allegations were put to me, I got expert tax advice to make sure that I hadn't done anything wrong.
So Rayner was there speaking before an investigation was opened. So at that time, the police weren't looking into it. And what seems to have changed is a complaint from Tory Deputy Chairman James Daly. Now, according to the BBC, Mr. Daly is understood to have made police aware of neighbours contradicting Rayner's statement that the property was her main residence. So she's saying she did still live there. Her neighbours saying, no, she didn't live there. And presumably she lived with her husband, sort of a kilometre away or something. Keir Starmer is standing by his deputy, though. He said this today.
We welcome this investigation because it will allow a line to be drawn in relation to this matter. I am fully confident that Angela Rayner has not broken the rules. She will cooperate with the investigation as you would expect, and it's really a matter for the police.
And why are you so confident? Angela Rayner also plays a very full part in campaigning. And would it make sense, while the investigation's going on, for her from a neutral point of view, not to be as visible a presence for the Labour Party?
The important thing is that Angela Rayner has already given no end of answers in relation to this matter. She will, of course, cooperate with the police, and I think that it's now a police investigation, and we need to let the police get on with their job.
He's saying he stands by Angela Rayner. As you might imagine, Grant Shapps saw an opportunity to attack the Labour Party.
I think the double standards have been extraordinary. Angela Rayner herself has spent her political career calling people out for exactly the thing that she seems to be doing now. It's not acceptable to ignore it, and it's not acceptable for Keir Starmer to say he won't even read reports into it. This is something which is a serious matter. It's important that it's looked into properly, and I welcome the idea that the police are doing that.
Now, I still think this story is very small fry. It doesn't seem to be a huge issue to me. And I, of course, do not take Grant Shapps' outrage as genuine. I think he's the guy who sort of has done various things under different names. But he does perhaps have a point about double standards. During the Partygate scandal, Angela Rayner tweeted this: "Boris Johnson's Downing Street is under police investigation. How on earth can he stay on as Prime Minister?" So on that situation, she did think that, being under police investigation was enough to mean you should not be Prime Minister. So presumably he should resign. So that does potentially open her up to claims of double standards. An update just before we went live, I suppose potentially related to this sort of claim about potential double standards. Apparently Angela Rayner says she will resign if convicted of breaching electoral law. So I should add the police, it seems to me somewhat ambiguous whether they're investigating the tax issue or something relating to electoral law, which is that I presume when Angela Rayner stood to be an MP in 2015, she put down that house, so the ex-council house, the council house at that point, as her address, when the claim is that she lived with her husband, which would be a breach of electoral law. Very, marginally important law. But she said that if she is found guilty or convicted of it, she will resign. Aaron, all seems like a bit of a mess, doesn't it?
Yeah, I don't think she should resign. This is ridiculous. Utterly ridiculous. And I think they've managed it completely wrong. I think they've managed it in an awful, stupid way. They should have just said at the outset, if I was advising her, and I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon, I would have said, look, I'm very happy to cooperate with HMRC. If they think that actually a payment should have been made, I'm very happy to give them the cash. By the way, this will have happened to many MPs with regards to capital gains and whatnot. It can happen. Like you said, it's only £3,000. It can happen. HMRC pursues these kinds of things literally all of the time, like every day of the week. So that would have been a wise approach for me. So if there was an oversight 15 years ago, I'm very happy to pay it back. Let's have a process and find out. It was an honest mistake on my part. I have no idea. I've got advice. They said nothing wrong has happened, but it's in the ball's in the court of HMRC. And most people will be like, yeah, that's a normal response. The idea that you would stake your political career on this is crazy to me. Many politicians have done far, far worse, and they've quit. I find it absurd, actually. She's put herself, she's got like the sword of Damocles over her head, but it's Tom Harwood and like the Daily Express. Why would you do that? This isn't like a factional point. If this was the Tory MP, I'd say the same thing. It's obviously tax. Labour are very big on tax avoidance, tax evasion. I get it. But it's such a, it's like somebody who's an electrician and they don't add a job or they forget to add a job in terms of their tax at the end of the year, their self-assessment at the end of the year. It can happen. Obviously, if it's £100,000, it's £3,000. It can happen. It's an honest mistake. And I think people should be able to make honest mistakes without having to leave public life. I think she's a good MP. I think the country is better off having somebody like Angela Rayner in politics. There's not many people like her, former care worker. We need people like that in politics. So I think it's an absurd decision that she's made. In terms of the electoral law thing, again, it's not a major thing. It happens relatively frequently. And again, I think it's just an honest oversight. So the fact that she would allow other people that level of control over her future, I find odd. And I think, maybe there was a defensive thing at the start saying, I've done nothing wrong. I just think it's very healthy to say, well, if I have, happy to rectify it. Sorry, honest mistake, if that's the case. And as she said, there's advice saying that she's done nothing wrong. Great. There was also a contradiction though, Michael, because she's saying on the one hand, I have expert advice, but then she's saying, well, when I sold the property, I didn't have expert advice. She's saying that there was um, uh, you had your surveyor, conveyancing lawyer. I mean, they're not going to tell you to pay. That's irrelevant. It's immaterial. They're not going to tell you to pay capital gains tax. An accountant might do or should do, but it doesn't sound like she had advice from somebody like that.
I think the claim she was making from that clip is she's saying, like, look, I'm a normal working class person. I don't have a tax. And that's why they could easily go on the offensive here as well, because this is small amounts of money compared to the sort of money we're talking about when it comes to the Conservative Party, and especially Rishi Sunak, who's almost a billionaire, right? This is a house that she sold for, I think, 150 grand, and she made 40 grand, and the capital gains tax would have been 3 grand if she'd paid it. So this is small amounts of numbers, small figures, and you can say that this is the kind of issue that ordinary people get into in this country that they wouldn't understand. And I think the claim she's making is that at the time of sale, she didn't have a tax advisor, and she's sort of saying ordinary people don't have tax advisors. I had a surveyor, I had an estate agent, I had what ordinary people have, but I didn't have a tax advisor. But she's saying after the event, she checked with a tax advisor, and the tax advisor said, oh yes, everything was above board. So it's advice she sort of sought after the event.
Yeah, but I still don't think that's good, Michael, because if it is potentially a second property, obviously you should consult an accountant. Like that, I don't see how that's helping her. I just think you're opening yourself up to so many lines of attack.
I mean, the thing is, she wasn't a politician at the time, right? So I suppose most people just think, well, a tax advisor, that's just going to eat into the capital gains I can make from this. So if you're talking small amounts of money,
no, Michael, because then that is intentional tax evasion. That's different. If she said, look, it was my first time, maybe it was technically my second home because there's some picture saying I'm at home, which is just pointless, right? It's stupid. But she's, that you're making a different argument, which is she would have known. I mean, if she knew what she was doing and then she's done it, that's different.
No, I'm not saying she would have known. I'm saying, why would she? I'm saying it seems reasonable for me that she didn't get a tax. I'm not saying she didn't get a tax advisor because the tax advisor would advise her something she didn't want to know. I'm saying she wouldn't have got a tax advisor because you have to pay a tax advisor. And if people are doing, like, I don't have an accountant, for example, but I do my tax return for the work I do outside of Novara. The reason I don't have an accountant is because I'm like, that's going to eat up too much of the small amount of money I make in my self-employed role anyway.
Well, if you sold an asset for 150 grand, even if you were, owned half of it or whatever, and you're only getting half of that, I'm pretty sure you would actually, Michael. But anyway,
to be honest, I would quite like an accountant. But
no, especially because it was different for her, right? Because she was a salaried worker. As somebody who's self-employed, I mean, I think you almost certainly would have an accountant go through that, because obviously your pay at the end of the year and your assets would be significantly higher. But look, regardless, I think that the mistake here is management of the thing from the start. And I also, my ears pricked up at the start of the week, Michael, when I heard an interview with Keir Starmer. He said, I've not seen the details in regards to her potential defense. I've not seen it. My team have. Yeah. And I think he's giving himself a get out of jail card here. And that to me is worrying, because Starmer, by the way, he'll turn on her as quickly as he turned on Jeremy Corbyn. They'll all turn on each other. Look at West Streeting on the Cass review. I mean, they'll all turn on whoever. They turn on their grandmother if it helped them. No, but they would. And that's probably the most worrying thing for me, was seeing Starmer's response at the beginning of the week. And I thought, why is he saying that?
Yeah, he's saying, I don't need to see the advice. My team have seen the advice, but he's saying, I don't want to see the advice, which is probably smart politics. But yeah, they have been defending her, up until now. Although he hasn't said if she should resign if she gets convicted, but now she's said she would anyway. So I wonder if she said that actually because of pressure from Starmer. That's also possible.